Hey everyone, welcome back to the Dairy Raid. And as I am working through the backlog of breakdown videos, just finished the Illinois game defensive breakdown yesterday. Going to be working on the YouTube version here shortly. Then, of course, there is the Minnesota game breakdowns, which nobody wants to see. I don't want to do, but I'm going to because I'm a professional, damn it, and I believe in completing the work that's in front of me. As all that is happening, the college football news cycle continues ever forward. And with the impending opening of the transfer portal and with changes in coaching staff, the silly season of college football is could never be more important as it is right now. And especially for a team like ours who is not in the postseason and their offseason has already started. So, in an effort to drive the algorithm and to give you people what you want to see, and according to the analytics, this is what you want, we are going to start talking about some of these topics, and we are going to start with the roster. And we're going to talk about where the roster is right now and where the holes are in terms of depth, and then looking forward to the portal and how we're going to fill those holes. So what I have here in front of me, courtesy of John McNamara and his Twitter page, is a spreadsheet breaking down the Badgers roster in terms of position, class, etc. Okay, as of right now, as of the recording of this video, and this is Thursday morning, December 11th, is a roster that has 88 players. Now, with how college football has changed and the rules have changed, the 85-man scholarship limit is no longer a thing. It is a 105-man roster maximum. So that is also going to change the way we see walk-ons going forward. And we're going to talk about some of them as we are going through this in terms of maybe that is where some holes are going to be in the roster as well. So what we are going to do now, we're going to start at the bottom and we are going to work our way to the top. Talk a little bit about depth, talk about is there going to be some room for movement in the transfer portal in that position, etc. I am not going to speculate about individual players that I am expecting to enter the portal because I am not in the position to make business decisions for any of these players for them, nor do I want there to be any perceived ill will or ill feelings towards any of these kids who do make business decisions. It's totally theirs. I respect it. They're doing what's best for them. We all did it. Just not all of us had to do it with football in mind. So that is that. All right. So we're going to start here at the bottom. We're going to work our way to the top. And we are starting with the specialists. And currently, right now, we have 5 specialists on the roster. We have a kicker, we have a punter, we have a kicker/punter, and we have 2 long snappers. Do I expect any movement here? Not necessarily, because we have a kicker, we have a punter, and we have a dual threat freshman backup after that. The only thing that I could see happening with these specialists is them taking a look at Brady Mellum, the walk-on from Sun Prairie, and making the decision, is he a kicker or is he a punter, and then getting the opposite. So we have 2 kickers, 2 punters, 2 long snappers. That could be. I don't know. And we'll see how it goes forward. I think the specialists are fine. Looking ahead to the safeties. Okay, the depth of the safety room is going to change based on whether or not Preston Zachman decides to pursue a medical hardship, and then he plans to pursue that medical hardship and stay on the roster at Wisconsin. Both are, I think, 50-50. And nothing against Preston Zachman as a player. He's a solid safety. But Matt Young has earned the starting spot at free safety. I don't see him losing that job. And so then either Preston Zachman is coming in to take the strong safety position, and with Matthew Traynor coming off of an injury, maybe. I like the young depth we've got, so I'm okay at safety. I know everyone was clamoring here at the end to bring in a safety in terms of of recruiting. We got the kid from Texas, Watts, here at the last minute, the flip from Houston. But with Luke Emmerich and Grant Dean, I think they are your safeties of the future. Raphael Dunn is in that kind of gray area between a star linebacker and a nickel and maybe a box safety type with his frame. There are some intriguing pieces. If Preston Zachman comes back as a depth piece and things can be moved around, and or you bring in a guy who is a depth piece who can maybe be a second true free safety type to alleviate some of the pressure on some of the younger guys, maybe. But right now for me, I'm okay at safety with how the roster is built right now. Going on to corners. Obviously, the big issue with the corners right now is the oldest, quote unquote, corners we have in the roster are true sophomores. So, or true sophomores, redshirt sophomores. So there needs to be a veteran brought into that group, an upperclassman. I don't necessarily want them to do what they've done every year the last few years and bring in the veteran to play the nickel spot. I think the nickel spot should be one of the safeties. Raphael Dunn, I think, would be perfect in that spot if they don't continue to use the star linebacker in that spot more than they have been using a true nickel. So if they're going to bring in a corner, it needs to be a lockdown field side man-to-man corner, a guy to replace Rico. And if they don't, then you build up Kairos Gaines and Jameer Scott for that position. You put Emilio on the background on the backside like he was working with Deani Hill this year, and then you build the depth behind it. But I like the young talent we have in the cornerback room. I do, very much so. There needs to be more depth. So if you can get a veteran to come into that spot and be an important guy in the room to play that field side, I think that would be beneficial. We need more than 6 corners as we've seen the last couple years with injuries, etc. All right, so that are the corners. Let's talk about the outside linebackers. There are a lot of bodies in the outside linebacker room right now. We've got 10, and that includes a couple walk-ons. Now, we are losing 2 important pieces from the defense this year. In Mason Reiger, who I think by far was the best player on the defense. Daryl Peterson, who at times flashed the player that he should have been. And they occupied 2 very different roles in the defense. They played a similar position, but they were used differently. Where Mason Reiger was your every down, all around outside linebacker. And you had Daryl Peterson, who was a rundown guy with a pass rusher's mentality, which got him in trouble at times, which is why he lost some of his rundown reps. But then as he got better as a pass rusher, then we got an extra pass rusher. So that was great. So those 2 guys are gone. If we look at where we are now in terms of depth, I see Sebastian Cheeks solidifying the spot that he had last year as that boundary outside linebacker who is your probably going to be the top pass rusher, but also a guy that's athletic enough to drop into coverage. Tyrese Fearbry is probably going to be first in line to take the Mason Reiger role as the kind of the all-around front side guy. I really like Michael Gardner in the little bit of time that we've seen him. A big, strong body. I think he can do what Corey Walker did this year, minus the injuries, where he could be your rundown, big body, basically defensive end. And between those three, I think you have a solid 2 starters. You know, if Cheeks is an every down kind of guy and Fearbry and Garner are used in tandem with each other, I think that is a solid unit. Looking deeper into the depth chart, we have young talent that hasn't been manifested, and a lot of unknowns. I think Nick Clayton is going to be your pass rush specialist and kind of used how Sebastian Cheeks was used at times, where when they would have Daryl Peterson and Mason Reiger on the field at the same time in kind of every down situations, and then Cheeks would be your third down specialist, but then also just getting in longer situations, using his athletic ability. I think Clayton could turn into that role with him and with Cheeks. So that's a role I see for Nicholas Clayton. You've got a couple guys like Jalen Williams and Ernest Willer, who Ernest Willer needs to find his place in the world. He could be in that Garner type position. Your pseudo defensive end. Jalen Williams, I think, could really be kind of like how Daryl Peterson was. Leteju is a very intriguing prospect, a lot of physical talent. And then Yahya God is a freshman. I really like his tape. So I like the outside linebacker room. There are 2 walk-ons in that room as well. I think talent-wise, I like where the outside linebackers stand. However, are they going to build the defense around the guys that they have here, or do they feel like somebody's missing? I don't think there's somebody missing. I like the talent, but outside of Garner, Fearbry, and Cheeks, there is not a lot of experience. So it depends on how they see it. I think they showed last year that they could scheme around players and use the depth to try to have the best 11 on the field as often as possible. So we'll see. I think we're good at outside linebacker. Inside linebacker is another position that I think we are pretty good at. There is where I think we are going to end up going to the portal here with the inside backers is I think there's a backlog. And we look at, obviously, how the starting lineup ended this season with Cooper Catalano and Mason Posa. They're not leaving the field unless they have to. And that is very obvious. So you have 2 different ends of the spectrum with that in terms of depth. You have the veterans in Ontarian Turner and, of course, Christian Allegro. And then you have the young guys in Thomas Heiberger, who finally started to stay healthy this year, Landon Gauthier, and then the freshman, Ben Wenzel. There are going to be guys older players who are not going to be in position to be backups. There are going to be younger guys who maybe don't want to weight, and they're going to be guys who don't want to change position. What I'm saying is I'm getting a long way around to say I think the inside linebacker room is going to lose a couple players. I'm thinking they're going to lose at least 2, maybe 3, if they encourage the walk-on to turn pro in something other than football. The only way I see them losing less than that is, as we saw throughout the season and towards the end, the 3 inside linebacker package where they're using that extra inside linebacker as essentially an outside linebacker, almost like a nickel, the star linebacker, if they move one of those guys out there. It could also be a case where someone like Christian Allegro could be transitioned into an outside linebacker position. And I could easily see Christian Allegro starting alongside Sebastian Cheeks as your field side run stopping outside linebacker, especially in those mid downs. So that could be one way that the depth or that the players can be satisfied with playing time without having to leave the roster. With having Heiberger, Gauthier, Posa, and Catalano all basically the same age in terms of roster classes, I think one of them's going to go. That would just be my opinion. I would love for them all to stay, but as we saw, as the season went on, you saw with someone like Tackett Curtis, when he lost his starting spot, he really didn't see the field again. And I think that's going to be very similar. So we'll see about that. There's also the junior college transfer in Taylor Schaefer coming in. And John has him listed as a junior. Now, in the normal world, that's correct. He played 2 years out of junior college. However, I do want to point out, and please, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, that thanks to Diego Pavia, junior college years don't count anymore. So, to me, Taylor Schaefer is a freshman with 2 years of experience. Now, I could be wrong. Maybe I misinterpreted the ruling, and maybe the ruling only pertained to him and or to Pavia and a couple players there, and maybe it's back to normal. I don't know. Anyways, he's an intriguing depth piece and could further cause some of the younger guys to maybe look elsewhere. All right, that's a lot of talk on the inside linebackers. I like the room. I like the makeup. Obviously, there's 3 legit starters in that group. I think there's some good depth pieces, but it's gonna come down to how they see themselves in the defense and how the coaching staff is building the defense going forward. All right, moving on to defensive line, interior defensive line. This is going to be a spot where I think there is going to be movement. I think, obviously, if we take the example of Tretch and players going in and out of the transfer portal, there's a name right there that I think could easily jump. And as we kind of saw last year, the fact that Nolan Veals got himself into the rotation ahead of scholarship guys, one, shows what they think about Nolan Veals. I thought he played fine in the time that he got in there, but that some of those young guys, there's some room to work. Charles Perkins is going to be your lone senior in that group. I expect him to be the starting 3 tech. To be in that spot that Brandon Lane and Javier Suggs occupied through most of the season. I expect to see him kind of in that spot because of where he played at UT Martin. Hopefully he's healthy. I always like watching him play. I think Dylan Johnson in his limited reps looked fine. So that's probably your starting pair. If Jamel Howard can continue to grow, maybe he gets in that backup nose tackle kind of idea. Or maybe. I think Vils is probably going to be your backup nose tackle. So now you're looking for 3 techs. And that's where you got all the young guys. You got Okapano and Petaway, DJ Ba and Arthur Scott, the 2 freshmen. Petaway was injured through most of the season this year. Okapano was kind of growing from there. So if I could see them building and adding to this room, it would be in the Javier Suggs kind of 3 tech world. Maybe a guy with some pass rush ability, but more importantly, a guy who's going to be the play side run stopper, the guy who's going to spill it to the field. There are a couple more walk-ons that, again, maybe if we could, this is going to sound so horrible when I say it this word, if we can upgrade a couple walk-ons into scholarship-type players, that benefits the roster, and that's 2 spots that could be opened up there. Just saying. So as we were saying with the outside linebackers, there are some pieces that I like, but there's a lot of young, unproven talent. So if they're going to go transfer portal here, it is going to be for an experienced starter type who can get in the rotation with some of these younger guys. So that's where we're going to be there. All right. Offensive line. This one is the huge who knows. Obviously, with the departure of A.J. Blazik, the incoming new offensive line coach, Eric Mateos, the offensive line room is going to change because, let's face it, of the guys who are currently on the roster, there are 12 scholarship offensive linemen. 11 of them were recruited by A.J. Blazik, if I'm looking here correctly. And depending on where A.J. Blazik ends up, I'm particularly thinking any of these guys who may not be Midwesterners, who kind of did what Maddox Cochran. You look at Maddox Cochran's excuse to why he decommitted. That could happen with some of these young guys here. That being said, let's assume everyone stays on the roster. The oldest players with true playing time and experience on this roster are, make sure I get this right, redshirt sophomores. We have 2 seniors, and I don't expect to see either of them play. One of them is always injured, and one of them just isn't good enough. And we have a big, not a backlog. Like, it's important to have good numbers, but we got a ton of sophomores and redshirt freshmen. And we need veteran players in this room. So looking at the makeup of the room right now, assuming that Joe Brunner doesn't come back, and why would he? Um, he should end up in the portal somewheres and go to a MAC school. You got Emerson Mandel, Ryan Corey, Colin Carberly, and assuming that he's healthy, Kevin Haywood coming back. To me, that means you have Haywood as your starting left tackle. Mandel, for me, would be the starting left guard. Corey could potentially be a center. And Carberly as the right guard. Now, you could also continue the experiment with Mandel at right tackle. I don't know. But those four is where we're looking at right now. We need a veteran center. We need a veteran center with multiple years of eligibility left. Nothing against Corey. He ended up being fine as the season went on. But he is the only center on the roster. And we need more. We just need more. And I think we need a proven starter in that spot. We also need a right tackle. And maybe we call it a swing tackle. But we need a guy who is starter capable as a right tackle. Not saying he has to start. Because again, I like the depth behind. With Nolan Davenport worked his way into the 2 deep. And Michael Rusky worked his way up. And again, we have young, talented tackle types. They're young. And if we want to go back to the idea of how Wisconsin football used to be built, these are the bulk of our offensive line group would be the guys who would start as redshirt juniors and start for 2 seasons. That's how things used to be. So if we think of it the old school Wisconsin way, which everyone wants to, this offensive line is a year away. So we need some pieces to bridge the gap. I love all the young talent we have. And assuming that a bunch of them don't leave to follow A.J. Blazik or just to leave, period, because the guy who brought them here is no longer there, I like the room. That being said, we look at the backlog at some of the positions, and we look at the ages of these players. I am expecting we need 1, and I'm expecting 2 to leave. So that puts me at +3 for the O-line group. And of that, I want to see a center, a right tackle, and then best available. We can go from there. All right. Moving on from the offensive line and looking at the tight ends. This room I'm pretty okay with. We have no senior, but we have some playing time, some experience. Tucker Ashcraft has been a full or part-time starter in all 3 years that he's been here. He obviously was injured for most of last year, so assuming he's going to get a medical red shirt, he's going to be a red shirt junior this year. Jackson McGowan I think he could be the Lance Mason of this offense, the pass-catching tight end. He showed some flashes in his opportunities that he got this year, but I think between the two of them there, and then you have Grant Steck, who got a lot of tight end 2 reps as the season wore on with injuries. But like we said with the defensive line, between those 3 guys, you have 2 solid starters. You got an every down guy like Tucker Ashcraft, and you got maybe a pass catching specialist in Jackson McGowan, and you have a run blocker who is a pretty decent receiver, as we can see by his catch early in the season in Grant Steck. Emmett Bork, a lot of people have been talking about Emmett Bork and him pushing himself forward to getting some playing time, so you could easily see him getting in the 2 deep in a 12 personnel kind of world. Nyzie Davis is in the Jackson McGowan mold, and then you got Jack Severs as the Freshman. I like the tight end room. And I think the depth is there. I think the mix of talent is there. I don't see them going for anybody in the tight end world unless they're looking for a fullback, which we'll talk about as we get into the running backs. All right, so that is that. Let's move on to the wide receivers. And with Treach leaving, obviously, that is, again, another sign that Wisconsin football is dead. And, oh my God, what are we going to do about it? But here's the deal. And I mean this with as much respect as I can possibly give to Treach. He never got it. And what I mean by that is he was good at so how do I put this? Treach is great at what makes Treach Treach. Treach continues to struggle with what makes a receiver a good receiver. He's not a very good route runner. He just isn't. He's good at being in space, but he's not good at getting there. He is undersized, so he lacked the ability to be physical. And that caused him to run routes poorly. And if you look at the film, especially at the second half of the season, I question effort. That's all I'm going to say about Treach. To get back to the point in that his departure, while it loses experience, production is not that much lost. That being said, there is zero depth in the wide receiver room. Chris Brooks, I think, showed why maybe he waited all the way until last year to get playing time. He's not that quick. He's a good blocker. He's physical. He's got decent hands. He's not a receiver one. Tyrell Henry has some intriguing inside-outside versatility. They used him quite a lot in the run game. I think, dare I say, he was more complete in that role than Treach was. But he was injured a lot, and don't know about that. Eugene Hilton is probably the most starter-capable player on the roster right now. He is also not that fast. And then you have the two freshmen. You have Legree and Tabatou. So what this is screaming at right here for me is you need receivers who can get open in short space. So I don't necessarily need speed, like top end number speed, because we had it last year. Ballard and Treach, the combine numbers would say that they're fast. But if you can't get open, it doesn't matter. So what I want to see is them bring in a receiver who has short space quickness and can get open. The breakaway speed after that depends on the quarterback. We'll talk about the quarterback here in a second. So without the breakaway speed, you need a receiver who can get open in a short space. I want to see a big body receiver who can get open in short space, who can stay healthy and can get academically eligible. These are all issues that this receiver room has had over the last couple of years. We need a guy like that. We need a guy like that who has multiple years of eligibility to take Treach's spot in the scholarship distribution. We need somebody to take Kyan Barry-Johnson's spot in the roster distribution. So the junior, redshirt, sophomore kind of area, redshirt junior, true sophomore, whatever, in that kind of area. True junior, yeah, you get what I mean. And we need outside receivers who can get open in short space, who can run good routes, and can create short space separation. Downfield acceleration and separation would be fantastic. But we need guys who can get open. Because we saw it last year with this offense. There are times when they're only sending 2 players in the route. You got to get open. There are times where they're going to run 3 players into the boundary and there's not a lot of space. You got to get open. And we've just had an epidemic over the last few years of receivers who can't get open. We need that. So give me a big body who can get open in short space, who has some acceleration, and I'm going to be happy. We can work with the rest of the guys we got after that. All right. As for depth, I don't expect any of the scholarship guys to enter the portal. However, if I'm looking at the walk-ons, there's 4 of them. If 2 of them left, I wouldn't be sad. Again, if we can replace walk-on type players with scholarship type players, it makes the roster better. That's all I'm going to say about that. All right, let's get into running backs. And running back, there's 4. Tyler Jansey is a fullback. He's another guy who might end up transferring just because changing positions. We'll see. I like the opportunities, or I liked him when I saw him get into the game a couple times. Anyways, in terms of tailback depth, it's all going to depend on how the 3-headed monster that was the 2024 class decides to divide itself. That entire group, Gideon Atuka, Dylan Jones, Darren Dupree, at times this season were injured. And I think by the end of the year, the player who got it the most in Gideon Atuka is also the guy who had the most serious injury. So, looking at the running back room, assuming everybody's healthy, if one guy wants to leave, I'm not going to work hard to keep him. Then, whoever leaves, what I would like to see is again, upperclassman who can fill that role. So, between Atuka, Jones, and Dupree, I see an every down back, a first and second down back, and a third down back. If one of them leaves, we fill that hole with a veteran. There are also 3 walk-ons. One of them needs to move on because we need space for an extra scholarship running back. Simple. So, However the three-headed monster decides to work itself out, that's where the portal will go with the running backs. If they all decide to stay and they all get healthy, then we're going to have a really solid running back room. So I'm really happy there. All right. And finally, let's talk about the quarterbacks. This is going to be so interesting because currently we have 3 scholarship quarterbacks. We have Milos as the walk-on. Of the 2 scholarship QBs who are not freshmen, I am expecting one to enter the portal. Regardless of which one who leaves, we need, again, a starting quarterback in the portal. That's just what it is. That's what it's going to be. Boom. I want, and I've been hearing the names that have been floated out there, and I'm not going to go through every name. There are better podcasts and there are better people to talk about things like that. But there are 2 types of quarterbacks that we're hearing talked about. We're hearing of big school guys who are lower on the depth chart, who aren't getting playing time, who are looking for a second chance or a new opportunity. And then we are hearing about small school players who balled out on the football field who are looking to jump up. Which one do I want? Well, since we are assuming that one of those 2 non-freshman scholarship quarterbacks is leaving, the correct answer, Alex, is both. I would love to get a younger player from a P4 school who needs a new opportunity, who could push for a starting job if given the opportunity. Somebody who is maybe a redshirt sophomore or a junior who is in that kind of place. And then also, I would like a player who has played football in 2025 to be in position to be the starting quarterback in 2026. And whether it is a D2 guy or an FCS or a Sun Belt guy, I don't care. I want a player who's played football. So we have an idea of what type of player he is and what we need to do to make him better. We played our best football of the season with a freshman, true freshman at quarterback. So you can't tell me a guy who has 3 years of starting, 3 years of college experience with multiple years as a starter. You can't tell me that guy is going to be worse because he played at a lower school. It's not true. So we need both. I think we need 2 quarterbacks. I think we need an immediate starter who comes from a lower level, who has played football, and we need a depth piece, a guy who could potentially be a starter next year, could push that lower level guy. Because again, if you get a former 4-star who hasn't pushed his way into the starting lineup, and you give him a chance to compete, and he beats somebody, well then, the sky's the limit, right? So that's where I stand right now with the quarterbacks. We need 2, even if everyone stays. Okay? Because, if you look at Danny O'Neil, we don't has they actually said what his injury is right now? I know it's his Achilles. If he tore his Achilles, then he is out until middle of next season. And if I was Danny O'Neill, I would take the opportunity to redshirt and get 100% healthy, take the redshirt year, and then go be a starter somewhere else in 2027 with 2 years of eligibility. That would be me. Or he's there in 2027 to push the 4-star P4 bounce back. 2 available spots. So we'll see. I love Carter Smith. I hope they can really take a deep dive of what they asked him to do last year, what they asked the other quarterbacks to do last year, and see that what they asked the other quarterbacks to do, he could have done, but that the coaching staff limited him. They need to do better by him, or he's going to leave. Like Ryan Hopkins, he's going to take time to develop when he's not surrounded by 4- and 5-star wide receivers. It's going to take some time. So that is the quarterback rows. And that is the entire roster in about 45 minutes of me yammering. There are currently 17 holes on the roster. If I kind of do the math as if I was thinking, we'll just go through, just get the numbers here real quick. Okay, let's say 1 quarterback. We say 1 running back. We say no tight end. So I say 2 offensive linemen. Say a defensive lineman. We say an inside linebacker. To be safe, we'll say an outside linebacker. Okay, that's going to add 7 minimum right there. That is not including losing or asking walk-ons to move on. So 17, that puts us at 22. If we add a couple walk-ons on top of that, we're pushing 25 to 30. Those 25 to 30 need to push the roster forward and need to push the team forward because it is a make or break year for everybody. And this portal class has got to win. It's got to fill holes, but it's also put up or shut up time. They say they're going to invest more in this roster and getting more players out here, then they better do it. They better raise the floor of this team and bet that will raise the ceiling. Or we're going to be right back to where we were this year. It's going to be even worse. We're going to be starting over. And yeah, as a lot of you probably want to do that, I certainly don't. So that is a look at the roster. 25 minimum, probably in the transfer portal. A lot of room for improvement, a lot of young talent. If we can take the growth that the defense had this year and apply even half of it to the offense, we could have a better team in 2026. I am choosing to have that slight bit of optimism. I hope some of you are too. All right, thank you for watching. Next time we do a video like this, we are going to talk about the coaching staff and who has been doing the job, who still has some work to do, and who maybe needs to go find a job somewhere else. But that will be next time. Thank you for watching and listening, and we'll see you then.